There's a visceral response to the mentioning of the mere word. So obviously they experienced something.
He could barely talk about it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
no, and he's not the only one. Listen, one of the things...
It began with a man named Bryce Johnson, a wildlife researcher whose life took a turn no scientist could ever prepare for. Deep within the Pacific Northwest, an endless maze of fog-covered trees and ancient valleys, Bryce was investigating an environmental anomaly when he stumbled upon something far more mysterious than he could imagine. The area was known to locals as the Forbidden Timberline, a place avoided even by hunters. Rumors of glowing lights, strange vocalizations, and the feeling of being watched had circulated for generations. Bryce wasn't there for myths, he was there for data. But one night, while setting up his motion-triggered cameras near a stream, his equipment picked up something strange. A silhouette, tall, humanoid, and moving with an unnatural grace, appeared on screen for just 3 seconds before vanishing into the trees. At first, Bryce dismissed it as a trick of light or faulty equipment. But when he replayed the footage in slow motion, the outline was clear. Something, or someone, was out there. He didn't know it yet, but this fleeting image would lead to one of the most controversial scientific revelations in modern history. Within weeks, geneticists, anthropologists, and even federal agents would be drawn into the mystery, and what they'd soon confirm would rewrite everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. After that eerie night in the forest, Bryce Johnson knew he couldn't just walk away. He packed up his gear, returned home, and immediately reviewed every second of the footage. The more he zoomed in, the less it looked like a mistake. The figure was tall, at least 8 feet by proportion, its outline bulky, its movement fluid but heavy, almost calculated. Bryce could see the faint glint of moisture on the creature's skin or fur as it passed near the stream. He decided to go back. The next morning, he hiked 6 miles into the same region with temperature sensors, infrared scanners, and a high-resolution drone. It didn't take long before he found something that made his blood run cold. Enormous footprints, perfectly shaped, and pressed deep into the mud. Each one was about 18 inches long, with ridges similar to those found in primates. But the stride length? Impossible for any known animal in that region. He carefully cast the prints in plaster, took soil and hair samples, and sent them to 3 independent laboratories across the country. Within 2 weeks, one of the labs called back. The DNA sequence didn't match any known species in their database. Mitochondrial results showed a trace of human lineage, but the nuclear DNA, what defines the species, was completely unknown. Bryce's initial curiosity transformed into obsession. He wasn't chasing legends anymore. He was standing on the edge of scientific history. As word spread quietly among researchers, the footage and DNA reports began circulating in private circles. One Stanford biologist described it as a possible remnant of an unclassified hominid, while another from Washington State wrote that the sequence resembled neither ape nor man. For Bryce, that single phrase changed everything. He hadn't just found something alive. He had found something undocumented, something the world had been denying for generations. Once Bryce's samples reached the larger academic institutions, the reaction was immediate and divided. Some researchers were intrigued, others dismissive, but all agreed on one thing: the DNA sequence was unlike anything they'd ever seen. When a research team at the University of British Columbia ran the tests again, the results matched perfectly with Bryce's originals. The mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the mother, showed human origins, but the nuclear DNA, inherited from both parents, told a very different story. It was a genetic ghost, sharing fragments with ancient hominids, yet containing sequences that didn't exist in any living or extinct species known to science. The findings were sent to a consortium of geneticists for peer review, but what happened next raised eyebrows. Within days, 3 members of the reviewing board withdrew without explanation. Emails went unanswered. Requests for public discussion were shut down. That's when the first whispers began. Rumors that Bryce's discovery had triggered quiet interest from federal agencies that typically had nothing to do with wildlife. Meanwhile, Bryce continued collecting field data. His trail cameras captured more than just blurry shapes this time. There were sounds, deep, rhythmic vocalizations that carried across miles of forest. When sound engineers analyzed the recordings, they discovered vocal frequencies beyond human range, combined with resonance patterns matching no known animal species. In simple terms, something intelligent was producing structured sounds in those woods. Scientists dubbed the phenomenon Specimen X, and Bryce became both a hero and a target. News began leaking online, sparking debate between skeptics and believers. But what no one could argue against was the consistency of the data. 3 separate labs, identical genetic results, and sound frequencies that defied explanation. What had once been folklore was now forcing itself into the realm of fact, and the scientific world wasn't ready for it. After months of silence from the scientific institutions, Bryce Johnson made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He would return to the same forest, but this time, not alone. Backed by a small crew of documentary filmmakers, drone operators, and 2 biologists who believed in his findings, Bryce set out once again into the heart of the Pacific Northwest. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. Birds stopped singing, the forest grew unnaturally quiet, and at night, their thermal cameras picked up faint shapes moving through the fog, always just beyond reach. On the second night, everything changed. One of the drones captured a heat signature nearly 9 feet tall, walking upright across a riverbank. The movement was smooth, deliberate, and undeniably intelligent. As the camera zoomed in, the creature paused, turning its head directly toward the drone, as if it knew it was being watched. For 3 seconds, its eyes reflected the infrared light, 2 piercing, symmetrical orbs glowing back through the screen. Then it vanished into the trees. The team rushed to the site at dawn and found something extraordinary. Several trees had been twisted together into a makeshift structure, almost like a shelter. Inside it lay the skeletal remains of deer and fish, arranged in patterns, cleanly broken bones, evidence of tools or deliberate force. Carbon dating would later reveal the bones were less than a week old. This was no random wildlife den, it was a constructed habitat. Bryce documented everything, sending samples to labs under coded names to prevent tampering. When biologists reviewed the footage, their conclusion was clear. The anatomy was consistent with a bipedal primate species larger than any known great ape, with limb proportions outside human range. The footage spread through underground scientific networks like wildfire. For the first time, Bryce had physical proof that couldn't be denied. What had begun as folklore now had visible, measurable evidence behind it. But what Bryce didn't realize was that his discovery had already attracted the attention of powerful forces, ones determined to keep the truth buried in the forest's shadows. Following the discovery of the twisted tree shelter, Bryce Johnson's team decided to set up a permanent observation camp deep within the woods. Every night, the forest seemed to breathe differently, heavy, restless, alive with movement that was never seen but always felt. They placed motion sensors, sound recorders, and long-range cameras throughout the perimeter, yet almost immediately, the equipment began malfunctioning. Batteries drained without warning, compasses spun wildly, and data cards mysteriously wiped themselves clean. Bryce, who had spent years working in field research, had never seen such widespread interference. On the third night, a piercing static began to fill the communication channels. The air felt charged, as if electricity were crawling across the trees. Then, through the static, a deep guttural roar echoed across the valley, so powerful it vibrated through their tents. The sound engineer's monitor recorded the frequency, and when analyzed, it registered beyond the known range of any terrestrial mammal. Drones sent into the area lost GPS signal and returned with their navigation systems completely corrupted. Bryce knew this wasn't just about biology anymore. Something was affecting the very atmosphere around them. When he reviewed footage from one of the infrared cameras, his blood froze. Just behind his own silhouette, captured while he adjusted the sensors, stood a massive figure. 2 eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, focused directly on him. It hadn't been visible to the naked eye, but the infrared caught it clearly. Frame by frame, Analysts later confirmed the entity was solid, not a trick of light. Its proportions were impossible. Shoulders nearly 4 feet across, arms that reached below its knees, and a height estimated at over 9 feet. Panic spread through the camp. That night, Bryce heard footsteps circling their tents. Something heavy brushed against the fabric, followed by a low exhale that made the ground tremble. When dawn finally broke, they found giant prints surrounding their camp in a perfect circle, each one pressed into the soil with deliberate placement. Someone, or something, was studying them. For the first time, Bryce wondered if he had gone too far. When Bryce and his crew returned from the forest, they carried hard drives filled with raw footage, samples, and readings that could have rewritten history. But almost immediately, strange things started happening. One of the biologists reported that her university email account had been locked without explanation. Another researcher received a warning from his department head to stop associating with fringe expeditions. Within a week, Bryce's storage unit, where he kept backup drives, was broken into. Nothing else was taken, except his research data. Surveillance cameras at the facility showed 2 men in unmarked uniforms entering the unit at 3:17 a.m. and leaving minutes later, their faces hidden under caps. Bryce filed a report, but police claimed the footage had corrupted sectors and could not be recovered. Not long after, one of the independent labs he had worked with retracted its DNA analysis, stating procedural errors, despite previously confirming the results were accurate. Bryce knew something larger was at play. Determined not to lose everything, he turned to the cloud backups he had created weeks earlier and released snippets of his footage anonymously on underground forums and independent science channels. The videos quickly went viral. Millions watched as the massive silhouette moved through the mist, eyes glowing like embers, its reflection briefly visible in the river before disappearing. Viewers were divided. Some called it the most convincing proof of an undiscovered species. Others insisted it was an elaborate hoax. But what couldn't be faked were the data readings attached: magnetic disturbances, radiation spikes, and unexplained heat signatures that coincided perfectly with the sightings. Bryce began receiving cryptic emails from anonymous scientists claiming to have seen similar data before, but that those studies were buried decades ago. They warned him to stop. One message simply read, "You've uncovered something you weren't meant to find." Not long after, Bryce's internet access was blocked at his home, and his research sponsor withdrew all financial support, citing external pressure. His career was unraveling, but Bryce refused to be silenced. He was convinced now more than ever that this wasn't just about an undiscovered species. Something far more complex, possibly even classified, was hidden beneath those forests. By now, Bryce Johnson's name had spread far beyond the academic community. His leaked footage and DNA data were being dissected on international news, discussed by geneticists, skeptics, and even former military analysts. Some dismissed it as an elaborate hoax, but others, especially those with scientific backgrounds, recognized the consistency of his findings. Then came the leak that changed everything. A whistleblower claiming to be from a federal environmental agency sent Bryce a classified geological report labeled Subterranean Activity Mapping, Pacific Northwest Sector. The scans revealed an enormous network of underground caverns extending for miles beneath the Cascade Range, natural tunnels too deep and complex to have been charted by traditional means. Within those caverns were thermal pockets, freshwater reservoirs, and bioluminescent readings unlike anything seen on the surface. The document mentioned terms like biosignature anomalies and unclassified movement zones, suggesting the government had been aware of something beneath the region long before Bryce's discovery. When independent geologists examined the data, they confirmed the heat signatures and sound echoes were real. Something massive was living or moving deep below the mountains. Around the same time, a team of Canadian researchers analyzing air samples from Bryce's collection found microscopic spores with a unique chemical makeup capable of emitting faint light in low-oxygen environments. It explained the reports of glowing caves and flickering lights locals had described for years. Yet, when they tried to publish the results, the journal abruptly withdrew the paper without reason. Meanwhile, online forums exploded with speculation. Some believed Bryce had found evidence of an ancient species of hominid that had retreated underground, evolving in isolation for millennia. Others claimed it was a classified biogenetic experiment gone wrong. Bryce, now operating from an undisclosed location, uploaded a new video addressing the world directly. "They told you it was folklore," he said quietly. "But what we found wasn't just alive. It's organized, it's intelligent, and it's been here far longer than us." The video was taken down within 24 hours, but by then, millions had already seen it. Scientists, journalists, and curious minds began flocking to the region, desperate for answers. None of them were prepared for what Bryce would uncover next. After weeks in hiding, Bryce Johnson resurfaced with one final message to his supporters: "If they won't tell the truth, I will bring the proof myself." Accompanied by 2 trusted colleagues, he returned to the Pacific Northwest, this time equipped with advanced sonar scanners, thermal cameras, and breathing gear designed for cave exploration. Following the coordinates in the leaked geological map, Bryce trekked deep into a region so remote it wasn't even marked on topographic surveys. The team descended through a narrow fissure barely wide enough for a human to fit, crawling hundreds of feet underground until the tunnel widened into an enormous subterranean chamber. What they found defied explanation. The walls glowed faintly with a blue-green light emitted by fungal growths that pulsed like living veins through the rock. The air was thick but breathable, and deep within the cavern echoed the unmistakable sound of movement, slow, deliberate, rhythmic, like something breathing in the dark. As they pushed further, their instruments began malfunctioning again. Static filled their comms, and the electromagnetic scanner recorded spikes that went off the scale. Then, for the first time, they saw it. 2 reflective eyes glimmered from the shadows, hovering 8 or 9 feet off the ground. The creature stepped forward just long enough for the cameras to capture its silhouette. A massive, muscular frame covered in coarse, dark fur, its proportions beyond human comprehension. It didn't flee, it simply watched, unblinking. The footage lasted 12 seconds before the feed cut to black. When Bryce's team resurfaced days later, their footage was incomplete, corrupted, and portions of their memory cards appeared to have been magnetically erased. Only fragments survived, enough to show that something intelligent and alive inhabited those depths. Bryce's voice in the recovered audio trembled as he whispered, "They're not hiding from us. We've been intruding on them." Hours after uploading the footage to his secure server, federal agents allegedly visited the nearby ranger station, seizing all satellite records from that night. Within 24 hours, Bryce and his team vanished from public contact. Only a single encrypted message was sent from Bryce's account days later. "They know. Stay out of the mountains." It was the last anyone ever heard from him. Months passed without a single word from Bryce Johnson. The world assumed he was gone, another name swallowed by the wilderness. But then, something remarkable happened. A group of independent scientists from Norway and Japan obtained copies of Bryce's corrupted hard drives that had been anonymously mailed to them. After weeks of digital restoration, they recovered a portion of the genetic files, sonar maps, and thermal recordings. What they uncovered left the scientific world stunned. The DNA sequence was authentic. The sonar scans confirmed that the subterranean caverns stretched for hundreds of miles beneath the Pacific Northwest, connecting to fault lines and geothermal vents that could sustain an entire hidden ecosystem. The organisms detected through the heat signatures were large, bipedal, and exhibited coordinated movement, like a community rather than isolated creatures. The recovered sound files, when analyzed through spectrograph imaging, revealed tonal patterns, primitive but structured, suggesting a complex vocal communication system. In short, Bryce had not discovered a myth. He had stumbled upon a parallel branch of intelligent life. Shortly after these findings were made public, the government issued a brief statement calling the evidence misinterpreted data. But insiders leaked something far more telling. The Department of Energy, not wildlife, had classified Bryce's region as a restricted geothermal study zone years before his expedition, despite no record of scientific research being conducted there. Several scientists involved in the analysis reported that their emails were hacked and their institutions pressured to cease further research. Yet, more evidence continued to surface. A retired forest ranger came forward claiming he had seen unusual figures in the same area decades earlier, always followed by quiet military cleanup operations. A satellite technician revealed that mapping data for the region was routinely scrubbed from public archives. In the final restored footage from Bryce's expedition, his voice can be heard one last time, echoing through the cavern. "They're not monsters, they're survivors." Those words would become the foundation of a movement, scientists and explorers demanding the truth about what lies beneath the Pacific Northwest. While officials continue to deny it, several universities have since confirmed partial DNA matches consistent with Bryce's data, proving that whatever he found was real. Today, deep within those mist-covered forests, strange sounds still echo through the valleys, and motion detectors still record unexplainable shapes at night. Scientists can confirm what Bryce Johnson found, but the world may never be ready to face what he actually discovered.